What's up, everyone? Vinny Musso from Musso Athletics here today to talk about progression of exercises, specifically for core stabilization, kind of as it relates to low back pain. For those of you that do know, again, I have a background as a physical therapist and a strength and conditioning coach, so I do like to kind of throw, both of those worlds together, when I am working with people, if I'm, working with someone in person or creating an online program. And I wanted to, talk about, progression of exercises. One thing I kind of try to pride myself on doing is, not being one of those cookie cutter coaches that just kind of, gives, the same types of exercises to everyone. I think, the mark of a good trainer, whether a trainer or a physical therapist, is you truly, individualize an exercise or a program to that specific person. Again, so you're not just giving everyone the same exercises, no matter what type of person they are. So I think, talking about, progression of exercises is important, because, not everyone's starting at the same level. Kind of a basic beginner exercise for someone might be, difficult for them to do and might be a good spot for them to start, versus someone who's a little bit more advanced. You could start them a little bit further down the progression. But I think it is important to know, progression of different exercises and, how to progress a client, whatever that progression is. So today I wanted to, again, talk about a progression of exercises, specifically talking about core stabilization, which will relate to low back pain. So when I was working as a physical therapist, and even now working as more in the strength and conditioning and performance aspect, low back pain is definitely a big thing that a lot of people suffer from, whether it's just from kind of the way their body is built, or if they had an injury or however they got it. Low back pain is a big, it's a big deal, in the health and fitness world and in the therapy world as well. So there's a lot of different ideas of how we deal with someone with low back pain. How do we train them, what's the best thing to do, and kind of, what I like to do is I like to, so again, start with the basics with someone, and depending on how they, react and respond, then you can kind of progress forward. Okay, but what I like to do is really, no matter who I'm working with, whether it is someone, with low back pain who's just trying to reduce their pain so they can get on with their everyday life, or someone who leads an active lifestyle, has low back pain, is trying to recover from that low back pain so they can, get on back with their active lifestyle, or if it's an athlete, get back to doing, whatever, athletic endeavor they're pursuing. So again, want to talk today about, how I progress, a very basic movement, which can go a long way in helping someone, increase their core strength, increase their core stabilization, decrease their back pain, and, doing all those things, decreasing pain, increasing core strength and stabilization is a very good, foundation to build off, for more of our, advanced athletes, or, going into higher intensity exercises. So I wanted to talk today about, how I like to progress what's called posterior pelvic tilting. So just to kind of go over pelvic tilting for those who aren't too familiar. So if I kind of look at my hips, your hips can either, if you look at especially the top part of your hip, that's kind of the reference point that we like to use when talking about anterior, posterior pelvic tilt. So to kind of over-exaggerate the different movements, an anterior pelvic tilt, if I again look at the top of my hip, if that part of my hip rolls forward, that's an anterior pelvic tilt. I see a lot of people who are kind of naturally in this position. So again, if you look at that anterior pelvic tilt, I have that big curve in my back, or I have it's called a lordotic posture. You kind of see my butt sticking out a lot, so that is an anterior pelvic tilt, where posterior pelvic tilt is just the opposite. The hips roll backward. You can see I kind of reduce that curve, that lordotic curve in my low back, and my hips aren't flaring out as much, and, my butt kind of pulls in a little bit. So what I see with a lot of people is a lot of people are just kind of naturally in, this anterior pelvic tilt, again, where their hips are rolled forward. They have that big lordotic curve in their low back and their butt sticks out a little bit. And again, whether that's, genetics or just, they've developed that posture over the years, I see that in a lot of people. So, and a lot of times kind of that excessive, lordotic curve and posture can lead to low back pain because that just kind of throws the whole spine off. So if our lower part of our spine is thrown off a little bit, then our mid spine, our thoracic spine has to compensate. If our thoracic spine compensates, then my cervical spine compensates, and then my whole spine is just kind of thrown out of whack. So we can kind of look at that bottom part, our lumbar spine, this lower part of my spine, and really work on trying to kind of improve my posture there, improve the stabilization around there. That's going to really help my overall spine become healthier. It can reduce my low back pain. It'll help me, develop core strength and stability that I can build off of, that will help me whether I'm just, trying to get better at doing things in everyday life, or if I am an athlete or a very active person trying to kind of improve my athleticism for whatever it is that I'm working for. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in terms of progressing exercises, that posterior pelvic tilt. Okay, and again, which is if you look at the top of my hips, it's essentially that part of my hips rolling backwards to kind of tuck my hips in, reduce that excessive curve in my low back. Okay, and what the exercises that we'll do today are very, very simple, but again, a very good way to kind of build off on build a foundation to build off of. So I like to break it down into different levels. And these are all exercises that you can just do laying, on the ground. I wouldn't do it like laying in bed or on a couch, just because that is kind of soft and, it's not going to give you the best surface to work on. But again, all these can be done from a supine position where I'm just laying down facing up towards the ceiling. Okay, and I like to break them into different levels. Okay, so level 1, again, is very basic, very easy. All I'm going to do is lay down on the ground. And what I'm thinking of doing is posterior pelvic tilting. And what I like to tell a lot of my clients who kind of aren't too familiar with how to do that, imagine like someone was about to come and punch me in the stomach or punch you in the stomach. Think of how you would kind of tense up, and clench your abs. Okay, that's the way I like to describe people of what that feels like from this position. Okay, and what you'll realize is if you do that, so imagine someone's coming to punch me in the stomach. Okay, if I kind of tense up, you'll feel that your low back will kind of naturally press down into the ground, okay? And if you think about it, again, if I'm in an anterior pelvic tilt laying down, I have a lot of space between the ground and my low back. So I'm actually over-exaggerating an anterior pelvic tilt right now, so you can see I can stick my hand underneath and reach all the way through from the other side of my body, okay? If I posterior pelvic tilt, again, I think someone's punching me in the stomach. All right, I clench my abs, my deep core muscle. I think about pushing my low back into the ground, and then now from this position, as I'm posterior pelvic tilting, okay, I actually now cannot reach my hand underneath. So my hand's kind of getting, blocked off by my back, which is now pushing into the low ground. Okay, so that position right there is our level 1 posterior pelvic tilting. So again, I am just engaging my core muscles, clenching them, pretending someone's about to punch me in the stomach. Okay, and that's pushing my low back into the ground, all right, and now I'm posterior pelvic tilting. So for some people, that might be difficult, and that might be a good place to start. So if you find that it's difficult for you to just kind of know, build the mind-muscle connection of how to do that, this might just be a good place to start. So a lot of times, when I was working with someone with low back pain as a physical therapist, I would just have them start with this, because this, they feel this. They'll do this for 5 or 10 reps. They'll get up and they can already feel some soreness, in their stomach and, deep in their core muscles. So this level 1 could be a really good place to start, okay? Once we get good at level 1, then we like to build up, go to higher levels and progress. So what I like to do from this position is now I want to start kind of adding in, leg movements to really kind of bump up, how hard my core has to work. So after I do my level 1, which again is just posterior pelvic tilting, I'll bump it up to level 2. And the key with all my levels moving up, so from level 2 and moving up, all the movements I'm going to do them with that posterior pelvic tilt. So I am keeping that core activation the whole time, thinking of pushing my low back into the ground. Okay, so my level 2, I have my posterior pelvic tilt, I push my low back into the ground, and then one leg at a time, I am just marching my knees nice and controlled towards my chest. Okay, so this is a little bit more difficult than level 1 for some people, because for some people it's difficult for them to maintain that core activation while also keeping or have their legs moving at the same time. It's kind of, for some people, that's almost like trying to rub your head and pat your stomach at the same time. You know, having your body kind of do different things at the same time is difficult for people. So this could be, you know, an appropriate place to start with someone if that level 1 is easy, but that level 2 is difficult because they're doing different things with different parts of their body. So again, my level 2 is I posterior pelvic tilt. I maintain that push of my low back into the ground as I nice and controlled march my legs. Okay, so that's level 2. Level 3, we build off of that. So level 3, what I want to do is, again, maintain that posterior pelvic tilt, and now I'm going to do a straight leg raise. So I push my low back into the ground, I maintain that push. Okay, I straighten one leg out, I have my other leg bent, again, maintaining that pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt. I am nice and controlled, bringing one leg up and down. Okay, so this is a little bit more difficult than the march because we've extended the leg now. We've essentially forced our body to move more of the weight of our leg as opposed to from a bent position like this. Okay, so from this position, it's the next level, moving up from level 2. You know, if you try this by yourself, you'll see that, you know, your straight leg raise, maintaining your posterior pelvic tilt is more difficult than just a bent knee march. Okay, and notice on my bent knee march and my straight leg raise, okay, I'm always coming back down to the ground. Okay, so that's my level 3 posterior pelvic tilt exercise. My level 4 posterior pelvic tilt exercise, I'm going to go back to my bent knee march, but now instead of bringing my feet down to the ground each time, both feet are going to stay in the air. Okay, so I march, I bring them down, and what I want you to do is, we don't want to do what I initially just did. Some people will do that. They pull their knees all the way to the chest. I want you to imagine in that bent knee march with your feet off the ground, you are just barely pulling your feet off the ground. Okay, so what I do there is I just pull my feet off the ground. Again, I'm maintaining that pelvic tilt, and then I am marching from there. So if you feel the difference between doing this type of march where my feet stay up off the ground, and then compare that to marching where my feet always go back to the ground, you'll find that when your feet go back to the ground, it makes it much easier than trying to keep your feet up in the air. Okay, so again, my level 4 posterior pelvic tilt is I push my low back into the ground, I maintain that push, and then I march, keeping my feet just off the ground. Okay, so that's my level 4. My level 5, I go back to my straight leg raise, but now what I'm going to do is that bent leg is going to stay off the ground as well. So if you realize in my other straight leg raise, as I'm pelvic tilting, my opposite leg, the one that's bent, you can see my foot stays on the ground. Okay, so to bump this up a little bit, that leg that's bent, we take that off the ground as I do my straight leg raise. And you'll feel the difference between lifting that foot off the ground a little bit. Okay? So again, that's my level 5 posterior pelvic tilting. I am pushing my low back into the ground, maintaining that as I have my bent leg just hovering off the ground and doing a straight leg raise with my other leg. Okay, and then the final progression here, you know, looking just at our lower body, my level 6 posterior pelvic tilt is I'm essentially going to do a scissor kick, again, maintaining that posterior pelvic tilt. So now both legs are going to be straight, okay? I want to try to keep both feet off the ground. The higher my feet get off the ground, the easier this gets. So I posterior pelvic tilt, I push my low back into the ground. Okay, I have my legs up. Okay, and you can see, you know, you might see me shaking a little bit on the video because this is relatively difficult because a lot of people, when they scissor kick, they can scissor kick just fine, but their low back is a mile off the ground. Okay, so really the key for this level 6 posterior pelvic tilting where we're scissor kicking is I want to try to maintain that low back pushing into the ground. So if you're watching this video, you can try the difference between the two. Do a set of scissor kicks where your low back is arching, your low back's off the ground. Not all that difficult. It might be difficult for some, but it's not very difficult compared to if I try to do that. I push my low back into the ground the whole time. I maintain that, okay, and that gets a lot more difficult to do, okay? So again, just a very basic progression of, a really foundational concept of posterior pelvic tilting. Again, the better we become, or the stronger our deep core muscles get, the stronger they get, the better they're able to stabilize the spine. That's where we can really start to reduce low back pain, and we can really build a foundation of core strength and stability to really kind of become more of an athletic and explosive person if we're an athlete trying to develop, that aspect of our bodies. Okay, so hopefully, this video can, you can take something from it, whether you are a strength coach looking for, kind of some foundational movements to throw into a program. If you have, especially like a young athlete, a beginner athlete who's maybe not ready to get into like heavy weightlifting, you may be doing some body weight stuff with them. This is a really good way to kind of start, a core progression and a core program for them. And if you're a physical therapist working with someone who has low back pain, and they're really suffering from a lot of low back pain, this is a really good way to start, because it's non-weight bearing. You're able to do this laying down. You might have someone who's not really able to tolerate sitting or standing for long periods of time. This is a way that we can kind of start to work on, building some core strength in a position for a lot of people that's kind of more tolerable than standing or sitting for a long period of time. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, hopefully you can take something out of it. If you haven't, check this out, Muso Athletics on Instagram. Go ahead and take a look there. Stay tuned on the Facebook page and the YouTube page as well for more videos. So stay tuned for more, and we'll see you next time.